says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one you love's thing is the one you loving?
With all of the history and with all the conversations around racism and sexism and patriarchy and all of that, I wouldn't want to be born anyplace else. As I look around the globe, at the plight of women, having seen Barbie this weekend, I wasn't going to start off talking about Barbie. I was actually going to start off talking about Lake Lanier, but I feel like this is a nice segue into something that is bothering. This movie seems to be bothersome to some people. So I want to, if you saw the movie Barbie this weekend or last weekend when it came out and set records for a woman directed film, the highest grossing woman directed film of all time. It is currently the seventh highest second week film. I think it's the fourth highest grossing film first week. It has now grossed more than $350 million in just 10 days globally. $750 million it has grossed worldwide. So this is not just resonating in the United States, across the globe. Somehow this movie has touched some people. I wasn't going to go see it, but I'm like, everybody's talking about this movie. Damn it, this Barbie. I didn't grow up with a Barbie. I don't know about Barbie. I tell people I had Chrissy. I don't know why we need this Barbie movie. I don't understand the Barbie movie. I don't care about the Barbie movie, but I went to see it in a very empty theater at 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday. Brought my own food, snuck it in because I'm not trying to, And I'm sitting there like, oh, they done did something with this. Okay, first of all, acting, amazing.
Yep.
The acting across the board, but I'm like, the actors had to show up to work. You had to sing, you had to dance, you had to cry on cue, and that's one of Margot Robbie's superpowers. She can cry from each eye on call. Like she's perfected that. I watched the CBS Sunday Morning piece on her, and she's like, she can cry on command. So that's her superpower. But the acting, the set, it was a musical. It was a lot. It was big. It was a big movie with a bigger message that was meant to make you, those of you who left there bothered, good. Sit in that for a second, because we're about to have a conversation about the possibilities and the vision that you have for your life. And if you were bothered by this, why? 866-801-8255. I want to hear from you why you were bothered. Did you go see it, Dr. Mitchell, and all of the moving and stuff? Did you even have time to do that?
I did it today.
Did you?
I went today, and yeah, I quite enjoyed it. The performances, as you said, are really, really something. I can't wait to see where this conversation goes. I quite enjoyed it.
Me too. I don't know. I sat there first opening the first few minutes, the first 30 minutes. I said, the Fucker Carlson crowd are going to be mad about this. Mm-hmm. The men that follow Trump are going to be mad about this. Those of you who may even follow like, let me see, a Kevin Samuel type, going to be mad about this. Mm-hmm. Because it's a world where Barbieville is where women rule their lives and the lives around them. And Ken is ancillary, superfluous. He is not important at all to the day-to-day runnings. The president is a Black woman.
Yep. Issa Rae, looking fabulous.
The president's a Black woman, Black women, doctors, lawyers, all of the things, construction workers, like that. There's a scene with that. And I was like, oh man, people are going to be mad about this because we are in this space where folk want to fight over, we feel like we're in a gender war, which I reject roundly. I don't think we're in a gender war. I feel like some of this is propaganda, but then there's the movie that just digs in that little spot right there. I was like, oh shoot, this is about to be nasty.
Okay. So part of what I thought was so beautiful about this film is that if you're willing to read critically, it allowed us to see dominant discourse at work. And sometimes it illuminates that dominant discourse to make you realize what you've been drenched in, and sometimes it steps back from it. So that construction scene is a perfect example, right? In Barbie land, all of the construction workers are women and they are empowered. So when she comes into the real world and the construction workers are catcalling her and objectifying her, it's a moment where we can see, okay, in the real world, we really genuinely have been taught, all of us, that women are just objects and accessories. And so the movie gives you lots of opportunities to actually think about what are the messages that you have been drenched with. Now, the thing it doesn't do, because it's a blockbuster, and you know what, Karen, actually, let me back up. The fact that part of how we gauge the success of a film is to now know its numbers is a real interesting commentary on dominant discourse of our current moment as well. Because part of what it highlights, if you're willing to see it, is that we are all taught that our belonging to anything can be expressed through consumerism. So the way you know it's successful is because it did all these numbers. And we've gotten to a point where we know those numbers, right? Back in the day when I was growing up, you didn't constantly hear about a movie's grossing sales, but now it's part of it. So that's interesting for us to think about too. If we talk about dominant discourse, what are the various ways that you are taught to value something and know it's valuable, and that you express your identity by what you consume and what you don't, right? So part of the conversation I've seen is like people wanting to make fun of women for dressing up in pink and going to the thing. And someone else made a comment like, wait a second, think about how men dress up to go to football games and look like idiots. And you don't see that as equal, right? So anyway, I'm just thinking about consumerism, what we buy, what we get excited about, what we're fans of, and how our dollars end up being an identity marker. How we spend our money becomes an identity marker. That's another way for me to think about what Barbie offers us in exposing our value system.
Right. 866-801-8255. As I was, and you're absolutely right. There was a line about the smallpox that was given to the Native Americans and blankets, the indigenous people, and comparing it to the patriarchy in the sense that, you know, can you infect people with a disease, in this case, an ideal that can destroy society? And, you know, and I don't even think of myself as a woman who leads. I just think of myself as somebody who wants to see the world a certain kind of way, my world. So I start with me. What do I want my world? Well, so, and what does power and freedom look like? Because these are questions that I pose a lot. For me is to do the everything that is in my mind to do. I don't want anyone to tell me a person in my position or a person of my gender or my hue should not be in X, Y, and Z. I remember, a guidance counselor at my high school, which was a Catholic all-girls school, telling me I should go into nursing. I shouldn't apply to a 4-year college, even though I was in the top 5% of my class. I'm like, thank God I'm in a household with woke Black people, because that would never fly. I was going to college, a 4-year college. Like, who are you to tell me I should go to nursing school? And not that there's anything wrong. Nurses are a backbone of our medical industry. So period.
No
but
doubt.
She had lower expectations for me as a Black woman, as a young Black girl. But I didn't for myself. Like, my vision was limitless. Like, if I wanted to go to medical school and law school and all of the schools, I was going to do that. I never felt like I had any hindrances. Even going into journalism, I'm like, okay, how do I get from here to there? And I didn't even, I stumbled into being on the editorial board, which was the pinnacle, which I didn't know, because of all of the other things that I had done. It had given me a broad range of skills to be able to sit on an editorial board and determine mayors and governors and, presidents, and meet with all of these folk, and also write editorials that would change the trajectory of not just our United States, but our, the city of New York. But I think about the people who don't have vision for themselves, who can't see beyond their neighborhood or their housing complex, who can't see beyond their family, and I think that that's a sad, small life. But I don't think of it in terms of gender. I think of it in terms of how we've been conditioned as people. And if you feel entitled to have a life based on absolutely nothing other than the color of your skin or the makeup of your chromosomes, then I feel like that's a sad, tiny life too, because that's a life filled with disappointment, because you're never going to rely on yourself to develop these skills to get to the things you want, So part of this exposure in this movie was showing that there was a sense of entitlement just because of how you were born, whether you were born in Barbieville as a woman or, in the case of the Kens.
Okay, now you got me right where I wanted to go, because I interrupted myself before about this economics and what we consume, because part of what I was getting at is the reason why there's a certain limitation on what the movie ends up doing is because it is such a blockbuster. And so it's only going to disrupt up to a point. So I love what you're highlighting, that part of what Ken does, and Ryan Gosling executed that so perfectly. But part of what that character does is he highlights the way that just by demographic, being a cisgender straight white man, just by demographic, he walks into the real world and sees himself reflected everywhere. Part of what the movie doesn't do, though, Karen, is it doesn't actually highlight power differentials. So in other words, when we're dealing with Barbie land, we're dealing with a world that was made in order to create a retreat from the violence of the real world that is structured in power. And then when Ken gets to go into the real world and see the flip side, we continue to ignore the power dynamic there. So you act as if it's the same. Barbieville and the real world are equally oppressing men and oppressing women. And that is the false equivalency that the movie doesn't disrupt. But it's no question to my mind that, again, what you're highlighting is that we do have a moment of recognition in this film that just by demographics should not be what determines your life outcomes. And that is an important opening for a powerful conversation. So I think part of what you make me want to say is part of what I loved about the movie, but also saw it as an opening to think about, is that it wants us to think about how just flipping the power dynamic but still having a hierarchy is not the answer. What we need is something that doesn't require one to be on top for the other to be on the bottom, and vice versa, right? The thing that you're always quoting Toni Morrison, if the only way I can be tall is because I've got to stand on your neck, then that's a problem. So part of what the movie gestures toward encouraging us to do as viewers is to think about, what would it mean to build my identity on purpose and not have to be on top of somebody else in order to feel okay. That is the opening the movie gives us, even though it's this blockbuster hit and doesn't go as hard as I would want it to expose the power dynamic. But I just want to be clear, flipping it that women are on top and men are on the bottom is not actually change. You have to have something more egalitarian.
Yeah, but Pendulums, and if it were to go as far as you would want it to go, it would not be a blockbuster. I'm just going to say that
exactly.
out loud.
No, you're exactly right.
Dr. Caretha Mitchell, because you would go. But as you were saying this, and as I was watching it, I was thinking about the pendulum that swings. Right, so we had 400 years of enslavement, we had Jim Crow, lynchings, all of this, which we're going to talk about as well, because Chase apologized. We're going to talk about Chase, J.P. Morgan Chase, but then the pendulum swung where there was civil rights, a movement though, but it wasn't. I'm listening to Robert Moses's book. Let me get the title. God, come on, Karen. All right, I got it. Robert Moses, Radical Equations. Right. So I'm online yesterday, and Dr. Shonda Weinstein, Prescott Weinstein, posted Radical Equations, Civil Rights from Mississippi to Algebra, to the Algebra Project, Robert P. Moses. So I am walking because I'm get my steps in. I decided to buy this book yesterday on audio because I have it physically, but I haven't really had the time to sit down and crack it open. But I have time every day. I make time to walk. So in the foreword, and I'm recommending this book highly, in audio form, particularly for those of you who don't have time to physically read. And there's a different spiritual connection to that page when you open a book. But if this is the only way you can get it in, which is what I'm doing right now, Radical Equations is on my list, right? So I'm on this 40-day journey. I'm trying to read 3 books every 40 days. Only read one last 40 days. This one, I'm going to do the 3 books because this is one of them. In the foreword, which I normally skip the foreword, and it's foreword, FOREWORD. People think it's a forward, like going forward or backward. It's not. It's a forward. I usually skip that because as a publisher, your foreword is by somebody to get more people into it. So your foreword or your introduction might be written by somebody famous. It's usually a throwaway, right? Even when I write, it's kind of a throwaway, and it might, I might get like Kanye wrote the foreword to his mother's book, but it wasn't, profound. This foreword is profound. Right. And as it's Motivational Monday, and it starts out the man who is let me see, he's reading let me make sure, let me open it up. I think it's Charles Cobb. No, it's not Charles Cobb who wrote the foreword. Hold on, I got to get this because this was so powerful. I was like, oh my goodness, this David Dennis. David Dennis, civil rights. He's talking about, he's the man that supplied the vehicle for Mickey Schwerner and Goodman, who came down to Mississippi to investigate and also help people register to vote. He was supposed to come down. He would have been in that shallow grave right along with Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner in Mississippi. But he had bronchitis. He had a bout of bronchitis, so he didn't come. But that's not part of the story. So I'm getting all of this in the foreword. I'm like, whoa. And this book is about how math, algebra in particular, is so important for this generation of young people to master, because to not master math makes you a sharecropper on so many levels. To not master the one element, the one thing that allows you to go into so many other, it makes your life limitless to master math. And we absolutely have not just the right, but we have the mind and the spirit to math, because there's a spiritual journey too. And there's a civil rights movement in mastering math, which is why we got a mathematician on today. I'm not playing with y'all. Yeah. I'm not playing with y'all. So come on. You either going to get on this boat or on this train, this bullet train, or you're going to be left behind. We're moving forward. So in this, he talks about his grandmother. He was raised in Louisiana. This is Motivational Monday. So I was thinking about this, and it relates to everything that we're talking about. I'll get there in a second. So thank you for indulging. But he's talking about his grandmother. They moved to this place in Louisiana that didn't have any electricity and any plumbing. So she went and petitioned the politicians, can you please put plumbing and electricity? And they were like, no. She kept all right, if you dig the trenches and put the posts in, we'll run the lines. We'll run the sewer lines and the electrical lines. So she got all of the guys, the men, this is part of this Barbie thing, got the men in the community to, after work, after a hard day, because it's hard work in the South, right? Louisiana, you picking cotton, you doing all these things, to dig a trench, to put the posts in. It took them several months to do this. She went back to the city. We did it. They came out to inspect. You did it on the wrong side of the road. You know the trick. 866-801-8255. Did it on the wrong side of the road. So the men were like, we're not doing this again. So they threw up their hands. And he said his grandmother got her a chair, went outside every day and sing to the top of her lungs. Maybe it was bad singing too, because people were annoyed. She was singing to the top of her lungs every day. Finally, a man came out of his home and he said, what can I do to get you to shut up, basically? And she said, get you a shovel and start digging on the other side of the road. He said, I will dig if you will just stop singing. So he came out, and then another man came out, and so they went and dug the trenches on the other side. And this time, instead of this one woman and a couple other women going to petition, everybody in that neighborhood went back to City Hall, and they got their sewer line and they got their electrical line. And I was thinking about how we give up in the face of adversity, first of all, because there's always going to be a no. There's always going to be a no. It's always going to rain. It's always going to rain. It's never not going to rain on you. And there's always going to be opposition, especially when you're on the move. Because the faster you go, the harder the opposition. If you run into something full speed, you're going to get knocked on your ass, right? Life will guarantee you that, right? But it's up to you to get your ass back up, right? Because the enemy, whatever you determine is the enemy, is banking on you giving up, right? But if you can fight through it, you get all of the things. And that's the other message that never comes, but because we usually quit before the breakthrough. because it's too hard. Who wants to get back out there and dig another trench when you know they're setting you up for the failure? But then if you don't accept that, you dig the trench, now there's no excuse. I did everything you told. It's on both sides now. You got two choices to run these damn lines. You're going to run the lines, and we're all coming to let you know we're not accepting no. And I was just thinking about that in reference to the Barbie movie and how Barbieville got to become Barbie Land. You know, it didn't just happen. It happened because the community got together and decided this is what we're going to build. And it was utopia, right? In many ways. I just think about that in reference to every place that we all live. And what are we willing to do? His grandmama couldn't dig a ditch herself, but she got out there and encouraged the people with the muscles to do that, right? We often just say, oh, they're not going to let us do this. They're not going to let us do that. Oh, it's too hard. But no, if it were easy, we would all be doing all of the things, right? If things were easy, if everything that you wanted to do was easy, who wouldn't do something? Dr. Mitchell, we would all be doing the things. It's hard. It's hard. It's not even easy. And I love when people get on this mic for the first time, like, oh, you think this is easy? Come on in. Come on. I welcome you. Please do 3 hours a day. See how easy it is.
Well, it's interesting, too, the way that you tied it back to the movie, because part of what I found so powerful is the way that the movie was interested in highlighting humanity, right? That to be human is to have both the good and the bad, to have the joy and the pain. And if you're going to keep trying to avoid pain, you're not actually being fully human. And that was part of what I thought was the gesture toward thinking about something that could be past simply being on top or being on bottom, but doing something that is new. Not having to be on top or bottom to be yourself, right? That's the thing that's new that we haven't had good practice in, because we live in a society that is structured on inequality and violence. And so to practice something that is painful, but also joyous as you make the meaning of your struggle. When you give me that story about that grandmother who did the singing to bring out the community, part of what you're highlighting is that whatever struggle we undertake, we have to feel and give the meaning to that struggle, because it can just be pain and deprivation, or it can be meaningful. It's up to us to give it the meaning that you're giving it when you give us that story in that way. But that's the power of being human, is that we tell the story of our life in a way that empowers us or that disempowers us. And that's what I'm always interested in, making sure that we take the creative power, that God-given power, right? That moment in Barbie where it's like, no, I can't dictate to you any more than I could dictate to my daughter, is what Ruth, the founder of the Barbie, says, right? And so that idea that God gives you free will, so God isn't just going to give it to you, you have to give the meaning to your life.
Ooh, we're about to have a church. Those of you, I've said some things on these airwaves. We are not supposed to, those believe in God or not, that's totally your right as a human being on this earth. Believe in whatever you want to believe in. But if you go to church expecting somebody to give you the prescription for how to live your life, right? As opposed to taking this just as I would take vitamin C or vitamin D as a supplement to the actual lived experience that I'm having to fortify my life, not all of the, I'm just going to sit there and let you just feed me everything. And I'm not going to go for myself and live. I mean, some of us are supplementing ourselves into non-existence as a human being. And we have a lot of groupthink around. Anytime I hear so-called folk that follow whatever religion kind of like parrot the same thing, that means they haven't made their walk personal for them. Do you know what I'm saying? The same phrases, the same, I'm like, okay, my experience is completely different than yours, as it should be, because I'm a different human being. So I'm going to engage with my Lord and Savior or my Buddha, or whatever, in a very unique way. I'm not going to parrot the same things that you parrot or have the same experience that you have, Dr. Mitchell.
Karen, let me tell you what you just reminded me of, that I think the movie does beautifully. The way that it kept giving us replicas, I feel like it was a way of thinking about how dominant discourse, whatever it is that you most commonly say and do, the way that that makes us fall in line. So it is all of those different Barbies is a dominant discourse. All of those different Kens, a dominant discourse. When we get to Will Ferrell at Mattel and he's surrounded by all those people and they all have the same suit, that is a way for us to think about what happens when you just fall into line rather than creating on purpose in the way that you just talked about, right? That even your sense of God can be a supplement to your life, not a replacement for living your life. That to me is part of what this movie offers us to see. What are the ways that I'm just falling in line?
Right.
And it's not just one way to fall in line. There's a lot of different ways to fall in line.
You better listen. And I guess the ultimate question for me, to you, and again, this from sitting here every day is a tap on your shoulder, is a tap on my shoulder. Half the things that come out of my mouth, I'm reminding myself as well of the things that I believe deeply. You know, what is your personal individual experience in life? What are you contributing to this thing called life, right? We all come into this world. How have you come into this world? Some of us have some very humble beginnings. Some of us, I mean, you were raised in Texas somewhere, you know, in a
Texas on a dirt road.
That's what I was going to say, in a not very well-developed place. And now you are a world-class author and professor because you saw for yourself a life that moved beyond the dirt road. And not that there's anything wrong with the dirt road. If the people are still on the dirt road, they're still just as valuable because we needed the people on the dirt road for you to get here. Mm-hmm. So I just feel like, you know, we're all kind of looking over to see what other people are doing instead of looking inside to see what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And if you're mad about the Barbie movie, 866-801-8255, or felt some people thought it was boring, that's fine. Some people didn't see value in it. I personally was not going to go because I was like, but I've heard so many good reviews. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It's not in my top 10 favorite movies of all time or even this year, because I've seen a lot of things, you know, on the streaming platforms, et cetera, that I've enjoyed more. But I loved what they tried to do with this movie in the sense of like really challenging certain notions about things. And as I was leaving, I was like, and if anyone's mad, I can't name 3 global leaders that are women. Do you know what I'm saying? Like Margaret Thatcher, you know, was it Indira Gandhi of all time? Like, you know, I can go back to Egypt, of course. The Egyptians, the Kemetans had a lot of, you know, XX chromosome pharaohs that we don't even talk about, not to even mention Queen Nzinga and all. Like we can be here all day, stuff that is hidden from us, right? Historically. Because the Egyptians didn't do the gender thing that we do here. This is silly, just like they didn't do the color thing that we do here, which is silly. It's a small person, small mind that focuses on gender and color exclusively. That you gonna disagree?
No, it's not that I'm disagreeing, but you know, this is the other thing that I think is so powerful about the movie and a discussion of the movie. Part of what it gives us opportunity to do is be honest about something that American culture encourages us to lie about. And what it encourages us to lie about is the very human need to see oneself reflected. So in other words, we act as if it's something special, that it's important for girls to see girl leaders or women leaders. We act like it's something special for people of color to see people of color in positions of leadership. That's not something special. It is human. And so when you live in a society that is constantly putting cisgender straight white men in positions of authority and of every position, that is simply representation that bolsters one and gives one reinforcement for all the things that you can be. There's nothing special about how bolstered you become when you have representation and you see possibility. So it is absolutely the case that for me to be here, I needed to be able to imagine something I didn't necessarily see outright. But that is not to say that there was something wrong with needing to see that. It's just that we have a society that's structured to only give that to cisgender straight white men. So that's what I mean about not acknowledging the power differential. Barbie land was necessary because the power differential that gives us so few world leaders who are women, that power differential is what we're never supposed to speak. Another way to make it concrete is the fact that we're having the debate right now in the nation about no, slavery didn't benefit enslaved people. What we should be saying is slavery benefited white people, but you're never supposed to say that part, right? Ooh. So part of what is so important is to recognize what are the things that go unsaid. Because whenever it goes unsaid, it's probably because there's so much power reinforcing it that no one has to admit that they were bolstered by it. So white children in white educational spaces are bolstered by seeing themselves reflected every freaking where they look. At Ohio State, you're reflected everywhere you go, and that is bolstering you. So for people of color to want to see themselves bolstered is not a special request. It's simply what white students can take for granted. That, to me, is one of the biggest lies of American culture. And that is why I appreciated how we got to see Penn go into the world where he was reflected everywhere and how powerful that was for him.
Changed everything. He was able to change the entire world that he lived in just because he saw himself as empowered. And
but
knew
the problem was his empowerment was about oppressing Barbie.
Yes,
that's
because
what we got to get away from.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting that he thought he could be a doctor or a lawyer just because he was a man, and maybe he's right.
But that is how it goes.
He's like, I mean, oh, yes.
I'm a Black woman professor. I'm what, 2.5% of full professors in the United States. Do you think that's because there's not a lot of brilliant Black women? Oh, I kid you not. It is because there are a lot of mediocre white men who get to be, whether they're mediocre or not. And some of them worse than mediocre.
Yes. Well, again, the flip to that is, why aren't there more Black women? Why aren't there more Black men in those positions? Why am I the only, one of two now, in my department? Why are you one of 2%? Why is, and the narrative would be is because we're not capable, right? The narrative would be, affirmative action, right? That's the narrative, right? Somehow we have to have programs to let you in that we're actually mediocre, and it's just the opposite. And I'm not saying that the people there, but how do you know you're mediocre if you never have to compete with the best? How do you know that you're great if you've never had to actually run a race with everyone at the same starting place?
And the thing about it is, we do ask, why aren't there more Black and brown? But we don't ask why there's so much white. And that is the question we're never supposed to ask. And that is the question I am committed to, because like I've always said, I have been surrounded by white people my whole life, and that has never meant being surrounded by excellence. But you're not supposed to notice that. Everything that I'm drenched in American education encourages me not to even notice it. And that is the thing that we need to get a little bit better at, because otherwise, when you're always on the defensive, like in this Ron DeSantis thing about slavery benefited Black people, that keeps people on the defensive, arguing that we didn't benefit. No, we need to be about, okay, look at this unjust benefit that you have. And let's keep in mind, the only reason this conversation is happening is because the reparations conversation is getting traction. That is a victory that our white dominant society always will put in check. Right.
And we help the victory by constantly bringing it up, which I wasn't going to do today. And I never do. I rarely do. You rarely hear me. I'm not talking about Florida that much, unless there's something. You're not going to hear me talk about that because it's irrelevant.
I run my fingers through her hair as she smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one who loves things is the one